Lauren Bouchard's Bob's Burgers has managed to take the simple premise of a family-run burger joint into a long-running fan-favorite series that will now grace the big screen as well as the small one.
Should we just push a bunch of buttons on the remote? That's how I saw 9.5 Weeks.
Sharing a night with another animated series rapidly approaching eligibility for the senior menu at Denny's, Bob's Burgers reaching its 12th season might seem like it's just beginning, but it has the secret life to show its age.
Let me show you how.
Names are everything. The Simpsons wouldn't really be the Simpsons if they were the Wiggletons. Or maybe they would. I just needed a transition into this.
If I hear one more word, Bart doesn't get to watch cartoons and Lisa doesn't get to go to college.
When trying to come up with a name for the family, Belcher wasn't the first choice. Bouchard was split with the urge to make a cheap joke and to give the family a bit of a life beyond what they see on the screen.
You're gonna love this.
The first draft of the name was Boygas, which Bouchard wasn't necessarily thrilled with. Bouchard and fellow producers wanted to give the Belchers an ethnicity and couldn't really settle on one. So Lauren Bouchard looked inward. His family name is Franco-Canadian. That is to say French who settled in Quebec, and so he decided to give the family a Franco-Canadian name as well. So going with his first instinct, he gave the name a cheap joke, naming the restaurant-owning family Belch, and then adding the ER. Superfan Simon Chong decided he wanted to see if his two favorite tastes would taste great together and created a crossover between Bob's Burgers and Archer, another show that features the voice of H. John Benjamin.
Wow, I'm glad I could help.
Archer featured a trip to Bob's Burgers as part of Archer's Delusions, but Chong animated a 4-minute segment with the Archer cast in Bob's Burgers animations, complete with spliced together dialogue from both series.
You're a funny guy. How would you like a staff job? I'll start you at $800 a week.
The segment was so convincing as part of the show that the producers reached out to Chong and offered him a job as part of the animation staff for the actual show.
What? Danger zone.
Being a star in your own right doesn't mean you're not subject to being fans, or your family wouldn't end up being fans of someone else. That's the case with Kevin Kline's kids. That's a lot of K's without setting up a joke. Anyways, it turns out that his kids are fans of Eugene Mirman and Bouchard's earlier show, Home Movies. They brought their dad out to see their favorite comedian, and the two hit it off. As luck would have it, Kline's manager was friends with the casting director for Bob's Burgers, and so the show decided to take a swing at asking if the veteran actor would be interested in the role of Mr. Fischoeder, the Belcher's eccentric landlord and weird rich guy. The role marks the first weekly voice gig for the actor. It takes a team of artists to make an animated show.
Sometimes to save money, our animators will reuse the same backgrounds over and over and over again.
It took Simon Chong months just to self-produce a 4-minute segment. For the team itself to create a full-length episode, it can take up to a year from script to completed show. When you employ that many artists, you will have a lot of people who are just prone to doing cool artistic things. Storyboard revisionist Karen Heidendahl has worked in animation for quite a while, but drawing cartoon characters that would become cultural icons is just scratching the surface of her talents, and her daughter would like us to know just how talented her mom is. To that end, she created a YouTube channel dedicated to the ingenious creations her mom can draw, weld, sew, and paint, among other things that she creates in her spare times. Just like this Bob's Burgers inspired Zoetrope style machine, which is strangely hypnotizing.
It's different, I'll give you that.
The extracurricular fun doesn't just stop at elaborate animation contraptions. Artist and producer Tony Gennaro likes to give the scripts a little bit extra just for the cast. Each script that goes out eventually ends up with a custom drawn cover related to the episode and title, often parodying a famous movie poster, like the episode Seaplane that was done in the Top Gun logo design. The Bob's Burger production blog, Behind Bob's Burgers, has shared various covers and once even shown a wall of covers as a tease for episodes to come. Fans of Bob's Burgers probably won't be surprised that the up-and-coming movie is classified as a musical, as music plays a big part in the show, and not just via Gene's attempts at experimental pop with his trusty novelty keyboard. The show's quirky storylines and even quirkier experiments in music has attracted fans in the indie pop world with bands like St. Vincent and The National. In fact, it has enough of a following with these bands that they created the Bob's Buskers series, where bands will cover songs from the show, like the National covers of Bob Belcher's lament Bad Things Happen in the Bathroom, which are then animated to look like the show. With that kind of musical attention, it stands to reason that when Bob's Burgers released a 107-track album covering their vital first 100 episodes, Sub Pop was the label that put it out. Sub Pop is the label that's largely credited with popularizing grunge music and is also associated with bands like Sleater Kinney, another band that has contributed to Bob's Buskers. The fan frenzy doesn't end there. One of the biggest reoccurring features of the show is Bob's Burger of the Day.
Okay.
Originally, the gag was going to revolve around Linda editing the burger's titles without Bob looking, but that was quickly dropped, and instead, Bob's interest in culinary experimentation and pun-based humor remained, establishing both Bob's passion for food and a peek inside his sense of humor. The names also relate to the episode at hand. The writer for each episode submits a list of 10 burger titles to Bouchard, who then picks his favorite. If the span of the episode lasts more than one day, he'll choose more, or the writer will submit another list. While all the Burger of the Days are puns based on the episodes, superfan Cole Bowden started a blog called the Bob's Burgers Experiment. In the blog, Bowden tried to guess the recipes of Bob's daily specials. Bouchard had considered a cookbook tie-in, but thought that most tie-ins like that ended up being a reach, jokingly suggesting the evening news with Dan Rather, the cookbook. But then, Bowden's blog took off. Rob Perlmans of Rizzoli's Universe approached Fox about the cookbook, just as Bouchard had noticed Bowden's blog, and it seemed to all come together. The cookbook debuted at number 5 of Publisher's weekly nonfiction list. Dreams do come true. Where would Marge be without her skyscraper hairdo? Recognizable quirks are a staple of animation, and one of the most recognizable quirks is Louise's headgear. The Belcher's schemous young one is identified by her ever-present rabbit ears headgear. Bouchard likes the contrast of Louise being the most confident and assertive of the family, who has this kind of security blanket headgear. It hints at a little bit of vulnerability for the otherwise invulnerable Louise. There's another inspiration for the ears that is also a reoccurring theme in the series. Bouchard was inspired to give Louise the ears based on the manga Tekken Kincrete character Shiro, who wears a bear cap. As for the in-universe reason Louise wears the bunny ears, fans have been asking if the show would ever address it. Bouchard suggested that season 12 would hold the answers, but now says that the movie is where it will be revealed. As someone once had to explain to Homer,
very few cartoons are broadcast live. It's a terrible strain on the animator's wrist.
That big of cheekiness aside, Bob's Burgers is actually frequently live. We're not just talking about how the episodes are recorded with the entire ensemble at the same time, which is different from most long-running animated series. This allows for one of the more consistent features of Lauren Bouchard's production, naturalistic dialogue, and a heavy reliance on improvisation. But they also do readings of their scripts at live shows in and around Los Angeles, as well at comedy and sketch festivals around the country. It was during one of these shows that Bouchard and the producers were first approached about the prospect of doing a feature film. This keeps with the tradition of opportunity coming to the show. Bouchard was asked to develop a show instead of approaching Fox with a pitch, and Bob's Burgers was the result. If it seems like the characters were custom tailored to the quirky cast of actors that make up the voices of Bob's Burgers, it's because they were. Bouchard created the characters based on people he worked with before or wanted to work with and wrote outwards from there.
I like the sound of that. Sounds like something I'd come up with.
You just did.
You did.
Nailed it.
The first up was H. John Benjamin, who has voiced a character in every Bouchard show up to that point, going all the way back to Dr. Katz and the absolutely stellar Home movies. If you like Bob's Burgers and you haven't discovered Home movies yet, let me introduce you to your next binge. Bouchard said that he couldn't imagine doing a show without him and didn't want to, so Bob was built with Benjamin's voice in mind. The role of Linda was based on a series of YouTube videos done by comedian John Roberts that poked some gentle fun at some of the matriarchs in his family, including her accent and physical affectations. He was a big fan of Kristen Schaal and Eugene Merman from the alt comedy scene and wrote characters he felt would fit them. That's not to say that the characters hit the screen exactly how they were initially intended, or didn't go through some big changes on their own. The family's eldest daughter, Tina, has become a bit of an icon as the depiction of a young girl's awakening, including her fascination with butts and her confused romantic fantasy life with the otherwise entirely unaware Jimmy Jr. But Tina wasn't always Tina. For the original pilot, Tina was Daniel. Both Tina and Daniel were voiced by the actor Dan Mitz. Personality-wise, the two characters weren't that different, but overall, they were concerned that Gene and Daniel were too close, and Daniel became Tina, and a legend was born. When Fox approached Bouchard to do an animated series for the channel, his intent was to always do something that involved a family restaurant. The Fox animated shows have all revolved around families. Part of what sets this show aside was that the family dynamic was less conflict-based. Bob doesn't strangle any of his kids, there's no Meg that takes on all the family hate. The family loves each other while still getting into trouble or having that love manifest in weird ways. The idea of a family-owned restaurant allowed Bouchard to double dip, as the show would be both a workplace comedy based on the burger stand and a family comedy, as family restaurants often have the entire family contributing to the business. All of this is pretty straightforward, but it is animation, and animation lends itself to the kinds of stories not easily told in live action. Like how the Belchers were originally going to be cannibals that ran a burger joint. Obviously, the cannibal aspect didn't make it to the final product, but it was referenced in the pilot when the family is concerned over accusations that their burger contained human flesh. The only stable business next to them is a mortuary, after all. And who knows what keeps killing the businesses on the other side? Probably the bug infestation. Names are a great place for references. First of all, coming up with a bunch of fake names and people and places is harder than it seems.
Your name is Homer Thompson.
I got you.
Hello, Mr. Thompson.
References can become an easy device to remember the character names, as well as a guidepost to who they might be, and finally, of course, as a nod to some of your favorite things.
Hello, Mr. Thompson.
Even the seaside town has no official name, but there are nods to other things sprinkled throughout. One that happens the most relates to a 3-hour tour gone wrong. Maybe the cheesiest sitcom to break through and become part of the zeitgeist is Gilligan's Island. Sherwood Schwartz's tale of castaways is meant to be a comedic representation of the 7 deadly sins. What it really did, though, was to create the question, Marianne or Ginger? Hometown girl Marianne was played by Dawn Wells, and the movie star Ginger was played by Tina Louise. The latter which, of course, make up the names of the Belcher daughters. Perhaps it's natural that an actor from a series whose premise was a group of people shipwrecked during a 3-hour tour would get a shout-out on a show that takes place near a recreational seaport. Never was clear why anybody packed anything for a 3-hour tour, but examining Gilligan's Island too closely is largely missing the point. But there is an even deeper fandom that is reoccurring in some of the names of the show, and that is the Marx Brothers. The school that the children attend in the show is called Wagstaff Elementary, which is named after Professor Quincy Adams Wagstaff, Groucho Marx character in the movie Horse Feathers, and not, as some had theorized, Randy and Cheese Wagstaff of The Wire. Waiting for their high school years, should the characters ever age, which they won't, is Huxley High, another Horse Feathers reference, as the name of the college Professor Wagstaff teaches at. Oh, but we're not done. Henry Hackenbush from A Day at the Races gets 2 nods. It's the name of the rec center Linda teaches at in the Season 2 episode Synchronized Swimming as the Henry Hackenbush Recreation Center, and fittingly appropriate as the Hackenbush Downs, the name of the racetrack.
Do you mind?
Not at all. I always take the rat.
After 10 successful years as the anchor show on a night that includes The Simpsons and Family Guy, naturally, the Belcher family has both gotten around and been the place to be when it comes to cameos and appearances. Bob's Burgers characters have appeared on the show that reinvented the adult animated sitcom The Simpsons more than once. In the episode Homerland, they appeared as yellow Simpsons characters during the end credits. Bob's Burgers gets a double shout out in the opening couch gag. In My Way or the Highway to Heaven, Homer makes his dive into the couch inside Bob's Burgers to the confusion of the family. The cast from Bob's Burgers also voiced characters in that episode. When another Gruning creation, Futurama, did a cameo as the couch gag, Hedonism Bot gave out a challenge to the Bob's Burgers to top that. Bob himself appears in a story about short people boycotting Bob's Burgers and inspiring the Short People Got No Brass into Rib Burger. The characters have also had several appearances on Family Guy, with a portrait of Bob drawn by Chris to Stewie turning into a Bob's Burger cast member. All three fathers of the animation block appeared in The Simpsons Guy, with Homer, Peter, and Bob all in the same plane. In the episode The Hurt Locker, a nod to Bouchard's early hit home movies, the main characters of Brendan and Melissa show up on a soccer field. In that show, H. John Benjamin voiced Coach McGurk as the worst soccer coach ever. Well, I'm sure there were worse than that. No one seems as convinced that Jimmy Pesto looks a whole lot like Huey Lewis of Huey Lewis and the News. I keep expecting him to taunt Bob by telling him that it's hip to be square or to overcome something with the power of love, which now exhausts my entire knowledge of Huey Lewis and the News.
I think their undisputed masterpiece is hip to be square.